Today we'll go through 2 pages in your focus book to talk about reported speech. Afterwards, you can complete Unit 71 in my Grammar Lab for a little bit more practice. Let's start. Turn to Unit 7.2 of your focus book and we'll start with reporting statements. On this page, you see a text titled, "They said she was a genius," which is already in the form of reported speech, and you see a picture of a little girl. Like with any other writing, we'll just look at the opening and the ending and skim through the middle to see what it's about. From the opening, we can tell the text is about a 3-year-old girl called Marla, whose paintings got a lot of attention. As we skim through the text, we see that she attracted the attention of art critics, a TV channel, and in the end we see that many customers really like her paintings to the extent of not caring whether she really was the person who painted them at all. Before we look at the structure of reported speech, let's see how many people actually spoke in this text. Exercise 2. Match the people from the story with what they said. As you can see, the reporting verbs are highlighted for you in the text. So when you are doing the matching, all you have to do is just locate the speakers, who are usually in front of the reporting verbs. You have 30 seconds to complete this part. Let's check the answers. You may have noticed that I did not highlight a TV channel and the TV director. Instead, I highlighted the pronouns, because they happen to be in front of the reporting verbs. These references happen quite often when we write in paragraphs. When we see these pronouns, we know to trace backwards to find out who they're referring to. And once you've located them, you can match them to your answers. Now let's take a look at what we have to pay attention to when using the reported speech. The so-called reported speech means someone said something in the past and you are now reporting it, usually by writing. And since the speaking happened in the past, you have to shift all the tenses in the original speech 1 step back in tenses. We call it backshift. Backshifting is very systematic, but it's largely based on what you know about tenses. For example, if the original speech is in the present tense, we move it to the past tense. The same applies to be becomes was or were, and modal verbs also take the past tense form. Then what if the original speech is already in the past tense? If you recall the differences between different tenses, we do use the past perfect and the past simple tense to indicate a different order in events in the past. And usually, we use the past perfect for something that happens earlier in the past. This concept applies here. If the original speech is in the past simple tense, we move it back 1 step and becomes the past perfect tense. If the original speech happens to be in the past perfect tense, that's the furthest we can backshift and there's no need to change anymore. But if the original speech is in the present perfect tense, we also move it 1 step back to the past perfect tense. Now let's fill out the notes for grammar focus on this page. As we've mentioned just now, for the present perfect and the past simple tense, they all backshift into the past perfect tense. As for modal verbs, they can all take the past tense form. On the bottom of the notes here, you see, when it comes to the use of reporting verbs, there's a difference between telling somebody something so that you have to mention the person you're talking to, or simply saying something so that there's no need to mention the person. Exercise 4. Choose the correct reporting verbs in the sentences. For each sentence, you have to choose a reporting verb between told and something else. So you know the biggest clue you can find is whether the listener is mentioned. If it's mentioned, we use told. You have 15 seconds. Let's check the answers. For questions 4 and 6, the listener is mentioned, so we use told. For the rest of them, we use the other one. While we are at it, let's go through the meaning of these reporting verbs as well. When you are reporting someone's speech, if you use the word said, you are being neutral. But if you want to be more specific, there are other words you can choose. For example, claimed. It means you think this person is saying something either without proof or his words are simply not trusted. This word is used very often in newspapers. If you use added, you're implying that he already said something and he is adding more information to his speech. If you use suggested, it means this person is making suggestions even though it is not specified in his own speech. There are some more examples of reporting verbs that can be used in different contexts if you want to be more specific. In exercise 5, we'll be reporting the statements in exercise 4. For reported speech, we know each sentence should begin with the speaker followed by a reporting verb, like this. As for the content of the speech, remember to pay attention to the verbs because you have to backshift the tenses, and for the last two questions, remember to change the pronouns as well. The opening of each sentence is given, and you have 1 minute to complete the rest. Let's check the answers. All the tenses that need to be backshifted are underlined for easier reference. If you realize you got some of the tenses wrong, look at Grammar Focus again to see how the tenses should be changed. For questions 6 and 7, the changes in pronouns are also highlighted for you in bold. As you may remember from learning this in Form 1, reported speech is so much more than just changing tenses, although that is a big part of what you have to keep in mind when writing these sentences. When you are writing about something that is said in the past, all of the time, places, and people that are mentioned in the original speech would be referring to different things now. For example, if you used the word today in a conversation last week, and you want to recall that interaction now, you can't say today anymore. You have to say that day or last Monday, so that someone will understand what you're referring to now. That's why when we are writing reported speech, we have to change the tense as well as all the references to time, place, and pronouns. Let's complete exercise 6 to see how it's done. For starters, we know that all 6 sentences should begin with the speakers and the reporting verbs. As for the rest of them, as usual, you have to pay attention to tenses, but this time also the places and pronouns that are mentioned. And at the end of each sentence, you have to choose one of the given time expressions in the box to complete the sentence. The opening for each sentence is given, and you now have 1 minute to complete the rest of them. Let's check the answers. Among all of these sentences, the pronouns in question 2, 3, and 5 are the most challenging because you have to be very clear about who the first and second pronouns are referring to in the original speech in order to work out what the pronoun should be changed to. If you changed any of the tenses wrongly or made a mistake in matching the time expressions, check the notes again to help yourself remember it better. Turn your book to Unit 7.5 and we'll look at the skills for reporting questions and imperatives. Imperatives means orders and instructions. Exercise 2 wants us to guess what Darina does for a living from the list of interview questions. We can see that she is asked about her dating life, also given instructions on how to pose in front of a camera. From these two, we can guess that she has some popularity, but she's not used to being in front of a camera. A final clue that helps us guess is that she will be attending the Oscars, a grand event for people working in the film industry. With all these clues put together, we can tell that she is a film director. When we write reported speech, we always write in sentences. That's why when we are reporting questions, we have to change the order of words so that the subject will now be before the verb, like in any other sentences. The question, "How are you?" would be reported as, "She asked how you are." And for the different types of questions, we have two different ways to report them. For yes-no questions, we have to use if or whether. For WH questions, we keep the WH words, but remember to change the order of words. And when you're reporting orders, you may use ask or tell someone to do something or tell someone not to do something. Let's consolidate these ideas with the following exercises. Exercise 4. Put the words in the correct order to form reported questions and imperatives. The opening is actually given to you. They all begin with, "They asked me." When you are reporting a question, we know that the word that follows "they asked me" should either be if, whether, or a WH word that's given. If you're reporting imperatives, it may be to do something or not to do something, depending on what information is given. And if you look through the 6 questions that you have to write for, you realize they should start with this. You now have 1 minute to complete the rest of them by rearranging the words. Let's check the answers. What you should be checking for now, and also when you're writing your own sentences, is that the subject should be in front of the verb. For example, question 2. Instead of who was I dating, like a question, it is now who I was dating. The same applies to the rest of the questions. Let's have a little bit more practice with exercise 6. Before you go straight on to reporting the questions and imperatives, take 10 seconds time to categorize each of these to see which of them are yes-no questions, WH questions, and imperatives. If you categorize them correctly, you will notice that these are yes-no questions and therefore should begin with if or whether. These are WH questions and therefore should begin with the given WH words. And finally, these ones are imperatives, an affirmative one and a negative one. You now have 1 minute to complete the whole practice. Let's check the answers. While you should still pay attention to the change in tenses, as well as the references for people, time, and places, since we are reporting questions, make sure you changed the order of words from the original question structure to a sentence structure, that the